Hey, you. Yes, you, the person who just hit play on that device, the person that's listening to my voice right now. Do you feel stuck in your life? Do you feel like you're living your life in a way that's compromising all your dreams and wishes, the ones that you had at one time? Do you know how much more capable you are, but somehow you can't seem to tap into that potential? Then wow, is this the episode for you? Stay tuned because this episode's all about tapping into that potential, and my guest is someone you've got to meet. My name is Will.
And I'm Karen.
And unlike Mulder and Scully,
we both want to believe.
So we've embarked on a journey of discovery.
We've talked to people deeply entrenched in the spiritual and metaphysical world.
We've thrown ourselves into weird and wonderful experiences. I even joined a coven of witches.
And wait, you joined a coven?
Yep, all in the interest of finding something.
Anything.
That will prove that there's something beyond this physical,
three-dimensional world we all live in.
This is the Skeptic Metaphysicians. Welcome to another episode of the Skeptic Metaphysicians. I'm Will, your host for today. Unfortunately, Karen won't be with us this time around, but just because I'm on my own doesn't mean that I'm not super well accompanied, because that could not be further from the truth. Joining me today is a practical mystic. She's an intuitive life coach with a mission to help everyone achieve a life that's lived to the fullest. So if you feel like you've hit a ceiling on your potential and want to break through it, Nicole Frolick is going to help all of us remove the blocks that are getting in our way. Welcome to the show, Nicole.
Thank you, Will. It's so good to be here with you guys finally.
Yeah, we've been chatting back and forth through social media. I tell people all the time that the reels that you put up on there, I just told you before we started recording, you're talking directly to me. Everyone who listens to the show knows how much I've wanted to reach my potential, how much I've wanted to have that spiritual awakening and all that kind of stuff. But for some reason, I'm holding myself back. Now, we've talked a lot about it on the show, but I'm excited to finally have the expert on the show that's going to help me break through all of that nonsense. Right?
Awesome. Breaking through ceilings is something I love to do.
No doubt about it. Nicole, so that we can level set, how'd you get into the spiritual or metaphysical industry, for lack of a better word?
Well, I mean, I've always been pulled into alternative health and also metaphysics. Meditation was something I started doing when I was a teenager without me even realizing that's what I was doing. And so it was just something that I naturally gravitated towards. When I was in my late 20s, I think, I don't know if you were on his podcast or you had him on, but Michael Philpott, he's out of Toronto, Canada. I met him. He was doing tarot readings, which he still is. And this is in my late 20s, and I found him, and that just kind of opened me up more. I started doing Reiki. It's like, I think the best way to put it is I got into this by walking the pathless path. And the pathless path seems very arbitrary to most, and it should, because there are no definitions, there are no linear directions. It's literally being guided. And as you walk it, you are in a way creating your own unique path. But the only way you do that is by not knowing where you're going. And ultimately, the general feeling is, I feel lost. That's how you know you're on the pathless path. And so I think by feeling very lost at different times in my life is how I got to where I am today. It was not because I had a 10-year plan or, all these goals set in line. In fact, a lot of those things have shifted and changed and morphed along the way. So I would say the pathless path is how I got into all of this.
I mean, that's a great term, pathless path. I don't think I've ever heard it before. And
your mouth is walking the pathless path right now.
Yeah, my mouth, my brain, my body, everything about me is on the pathless path. But it gives a specific image that is perfect. So that's a great way to explain it. Now, you mentioned something that I have to kind of go back to. You said you didn't even realize that you were doing meditation when you were younger, when you first went into it. What does that mean? How does that?
So when I was 16, I did an exchange program in Europe, and I lived in Switzerland for 3 months. And while I was traveling with my exchange family, they took me to a bunch of different cathedrals. And I was raised Catholic, but I was never really into Catholicism. I had a kind of a rebellion against religion. And I was more interested in things that weren't so confining or using fear to manipulate you. And That's not to say that the religion doesn't have beautiful lessons and attributes to it, but for me, it just wasn't resonating. And so when I was in Europe, I found myself in some of these cathedrals, and they were sometimes playing like Gregorian chants. And when I got back to Toronto, I went to like a CD store, and looking for something completely different, I stumbled across Gregorian chants, and I was like, you know what? This is what I want. And so I started listening to it while I was in the bath. And I started to realize I'm going somewhere. I'm going somewhere. And I found myself at such a state of peace. I was so calm, and I really liked how I was feeling. And my mind would just go to different places. And I literally felt like I was not in my body at certain times. And so I started to do that not just in the bath, but sometimes like before bed. And before I knew it, I'm like, is this what meditation is? You know? So that's kind of like how that all started, was
Right.
with Gregorian chants, because I
Well,
found them so it's like there's kind of like a mystical feeling with it that really, I don't know. I think I've had a past life for sure in Europe where I must have been somehow remembering those Gregorian chants, and it just spoke to my soul.
mm. Well, you bring up a good point because meditation, a lot of people think it's, you sit with your legs crossed somewhere with your fingers in lotus position and you try to still your mind completely. But meditation could really be all kinds of different things. Like there's, was it transcendental meditation where you come up with a mantra and you just say the mantra over and over and over again. There's the Gregorian chants that you just mentioned. There is that mindfulness, those apps, the Calm and the Headspace, that kind of stuff that's meant specifically for mindfulness and for clearing of the mind or focus. But really, you could take meditation in all different directions. Like some people, mowing the lawn is their meditation. They just kind of zone out and they enjoy that. That's really important to note because a lot of people think that it's a certain way. And I know, Karen, I know you're listening to this, and I know you're beating me up already because I hear you talking about the fact Karen has a difficult time meditating. I'm gonna keep trying to tell her to just focus on something, find her meditation. So hopefully we'll find it at some point. But
I was going to say to Karen that, there are no right or wrong ways to meditate. And if you can do breath work, focusing just on the breath, because that produces the most amount of DMT, right? Our lungs produce the most amount of DMT. And so whenever you can focus on your breathing and just get into a sequence that feels rhythmic for you, then that can help you. And that in itself is a meditation. You may even have your eyes open, but it's still meditative. And, I produce a ton of guided meditations. I produce one every month. And I like to go outside the box of what people think are meditations. And I like to use different music and really create a lot of different visuals. And so I think it's okay. Like I've listened to really upbeat music that gets me into a very high vibe place through my meditations. So I think it's important to, or at least for even Karen, anyone else who's listening to this, who's struggling with meditation, like you just got to find what works for you, and don't feel like because you're not doing it the way everyone else is, or what works for you isn't like everyone else, that it's wrong. It's just, all the power to you if you can find something that's really unique.
right. No, absolutely. And it's interesting that you mentioned breath work because that's the one thing that Karen said really sent her out of her body, that she really resonated with that very deeply. And I did stumble on your guided meditations, and I'm going to buy them all because I can't wait. I do meditate every day, but always looking for that different take on meditations. So these look like they're going to be a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to this. But so let's get back to the topic at hand because we fell down a rabbit hole as we always do. But reaching potential, what typically have you found to be the cause of someone not reaching their potential?
Fear.
Fear.
It's
What
the
are
most
people afraid of?
I mean, there's so many different facets to fear, but truly, I think it's fear of actually being more than what you think you are. Uh, One of the things that I started to discover probably in my very early 30s was how limiting my mind was and how much that was dictating how I was living my life, the choices I was making, and how that would either open or close doors for me. And a lot of it had to do with it was a belief system that was very limiting. And I didn't realize I was so limited. Like I would say no to things just for the sake of saying no sometimes. And it was a very unconscious thing. I had to like stop myself and realize like, why am I saying no to this? Or why did I just believe I can't do that? And I think the big thing for me that really shifted was really understanding how powerful our mind is. And I know like we hear that a lot, like the mind is one of the most powerful tools that we have to use. But until you actually stop and observe your own mind and the thoughts and beliefs that are dictating your whole reality, because our beliefs are what create the frequency that then produce the reality that we perceive. So it really starts to go back to our belief system. And once you find out how to transform the beliefs from something that's very limiting into something that's very open to all possibilities, and I think that's the big key, is that I had to learn how to not be so limiting in specific outcomes. Like I, al- I still am, but I've always been like a type A personality. And so I like to like, have control over a lot of things. And I've gotten a lot better at allowing others to have control and to listen and to like be like, oh, you know what, that is actually good at. Let's do that. But before, especially through like high school, even elementary school, high school and university in my 20s, I was very rigid. And if I had a goal in mind, I believed that that was the best way and that was the way I needed to go. And I just closed off all other possibilities that would have bigger and better potentials, not even realizing that's what I was doing. And so I feel like, when it comes down to it, I feared that I really wasn't even good enough to actually deserve all of those things. And so fear of not feeling like not being worthy, like maybe like I think one of the fears that I was always afraid of without even realizing I was afraid of it was that people would see how unworthy I actually am. Cause I put on this, oh, I've got it all together. I can do this. I was super athletic. I got great grades through all school. I worked my butt off. So I always on the outside seemed to have everything together. But like I said, walking the pathless path and feeling super lost is how I got to where I am. But it was the complete opposite of what I needed. But my mind thought, no, you just have to have it all figured out, be rigid, show everyone you got it figured out and you're going to be fine. And no one will figure the truth out. And even I wouldn't even figure the truth out. But of course, life has different plans for us and certain journeys start to take place.
Like the typical imposter syndrome, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So then what was it that launched your spiritual awakening? Or was there a particular thing that actually happened?
I've had a couple, like, I've had varying points of my awakening happen, but there's been some really big moments. One of them was when I took a 1 year sabbatical off work when I was 31. I decided to quit my job. I was living in the Cayman Islands and I said, let me just quit my job and go backpacking by myself through Costa Rica and Panama. And I did that for a
Great.
couple of months. Yeah. And I did it by starting off with a 10-day silent meditation retreat. And then I was like, you know what? From there, I'm making no plans. Wherever I feel guided to go, I'm just going to go with the flow. Like that's my mission because I have to always have everything planned out. And so this really opened me up. So in that 10-day silent meditation, I had an experience on day 4 where I was able to finally bypass all of the pain that my body was in from trying to sit and meditate for a total of 11 hours a day, not right after each other, but throughout the day, there'd be a total of 11 hours of meditating and my body was very inflexible. I couldn't sit upright. I couldn't sit legs crossed without my feet falling asleep, my ankles hurting, my back hurting. Oh my God, my back, my hips, my knees, like everything was in pain.
Hmm.
And finally on day 4, somehow, I don't even know how it happened, but I transcended all of that. And for the entire 2 hours, it felt like 10 minutes. I was out of my body. I was so at peace with who I was. I didn't want to change anything about me. And I felt myself just as energy. I didn't have a body anymore. And so I remembered that feeling when I got back into my body and they ended it. It was very distinct to me that I had returned home somewhere. And really, it was home to who I truly am and the connection that we all ultimately have with our creator. And I started to cry like unstoppably. And I realized how much I had longed for it without even knowing I was longing for that connection and that reminder that I am so much more than the limiting ideas and beliefs that I have of myself. And so when I started to do that, everything started to shift from that moment. And I hated yoga. And it just seemed like every town I went into, I would meet someone who wanted me to do yoga with them. And I'm like, oh God. And so I did yoga with someone in the jungles that was right near the ocean. It was so beautiful. And I had the most incredible experience with it. So different from all the other experiences I had with yoga.
Hmm.
And when I had a different experience, I had to ask myself, why was this so different from my other ones? Like, why did I hate yoga before and now I'm in love with it? Like, the only thing that could have possibly changed, other than like I was in Costa Rica and not Toronto, was that something's changed within me. And I realized that I was open to a new experience. And when I was open to a new experience, I was allowed to have a new experience.
Huh.
And so that really started the catalyst of me starting to stay open to all things and allow the experience to show me what I needed to know, see, feel. And that was the beginning of a very big part of my journey. It was probably the beginning of my self-love journey that of course is still ongoing to this day. I don't think that journey ever ends. It just gets deeper and deeper. But that's what really got me on this. And that's what spurred my book that I wrote called Inflexible Me. And it's all about that journey of how my inflexibility of my body was a result of my mind being so inflexible. And that when my mind shifted, my body shifted with me and allowed me to completely have a different experience. So I think it's so important for us to realize that if we don't stay open to other experiences, we can't have them.
Mm. And what really caught my attention is that not only the 10-day meditation retreat you did, but also the fact that you just picked up and left and went on this backpack trip. Really nice that you're able to do that. But for the average person, right, I would love to do that. I mean, it truly, as you're speaking, like my soul is crying out, like that is what I want. That is what I need. I need something like that. But I can't, I've got a job, I've got a family, I've got responsibilities.
Sure.
So what can you recommend to someone if they can't go on this incredible journey like you did?
You've got to find a way to step outside your comfort zone. You've got to find something that you can commit to that pushes you on all levels, that is going to make you uncomfortable. It's going to make you access parts of you wouldn't normally access because of the comforts that you're used to. Different surroundings, different people, different environments, anything that's new to you that allows you that process of discovery is really important. And I will say this is a process that I use a lot. I talk about this with my clients because, I do intuitive coaching and I'll use tarot and oracle sometimes. But ultimately, I like to guide my clients into understanding how they can really make the choice for themselves and understand what the decision is to be made. And whenever you're really scared to do something, it's a really good sign. We think of fear as a portal we need to run away from. But fear is actually a portal of possibility. And I say in my book that our fears are often lighthouses to our greatest potential. So if I had never pushed myself to actually become a public speaker, I would never have my podcast. I would never have my YouTube channel. I would never be doing the work that I'm doing now that I feel so much joy for. And guess what? I freaking love to talk on stage, on podcasts. Now, had you told me that maybe 10 years ago, I would have said you're crazy. I was deathly scared of, like, it was one of my big top 3 fears of my life. But behind it was a whole portal of potential and possibility waiting for me. And so, one, you need to look at your fears differently. Now, there are certain fears that are legitimately, like, they're there to help keep us safe. But oftentimes we're so scared of our own potential and we're scared of failing and we're scared of the judgment that we avoid it. And there's so much waiting for you on the other side of that. Now, when it comes to big life decisions and making choices that could ultimately shift the trajectory of our life, which this particular trip absolutely shifted the trajectory of my life. You have to ask yourself one simple question when you're looking at two different choices. One, is the choice of me making this, so say it was, let's just say for instance that you actually could go on this trip and you could take maybe it was a 3-month sabbatical or something like that. Let's just say that you actually were able to do that. That was a possibility. You can say, okay, if I stay home and continue to work my job and do all those things and not go on this trip, is that choice reflecting my fears or my greatest hopes and desires? And then ask yourself, if I choose to go on this 3-month sabbatical trip, is that choice reflecting my fears or my greatest hopes and desires? And this is the question I ask myself every time I'm at a very important fork in the road where there's going to be a decision that could really alter the course of my life. And to me, it's one of the greatest ways to tune into your own intuition because it speaks to your heart. And when your heart is allowed to guide you, you will never be led astray. So asking that question is one of my greatest tools that I use with clients, myself to this day, because if you make a choice based on your fears, you're only going to create a reality that reflects more of those fears back to you. But if you make a choice that reflects your hopes and desires, then the reality will reflect more of those hopes and desires back to you.
But that fear, boy, that fear is pretty phenomenal, right? A lot of the self-help books like Eckhart Tolle, I mean, all those Seed of the Soul, they all talk about doing what's right for you, doing what's right, what's going to be for your greatest good. And perhaps taking a sabbatical from 3 months sabbatical from work might be the greatest good. But that fear is really hard to get around because there's no guarantees that taking 3 months away from your family, for example, or your job is going to give you what you need. And in fact, it might actually hurt your physical reality, right? The ego that we identify with, that we are not, but we identify with, makes it difficult for us to trust that if we just let go. I hate to use a cliche, let go and let God, but in essence, that's what you're doing, right? You're letting the universe guide you, the spirit guide you in the direction that's to your highest good or what feels right to your spirit. So is there a way? You just have to suck it up and do it. Or is there a way to actually take a look at that fear and say, it's going to be okay?
Okay, so a couple things here. One is usually we as humans will wait until our back is completely up against the wall before we actually make a change in our life.
Well, that's spiritual awakenings are all about that, right? That usually takes like some traumatic event to wake people up sometimes, me included.
Because we've been avoiding the thing that's been speaking to us for so long.
Sure. Yep. That makes sense.
And so one of the things that I tend to remind myself of is that if I want my life to be different, if I'm not happy with a part of my life or a certain way that I'm living, I have to ask myself, if I want it to be different, then I have to be different. I can't keep doing things the same way or I'm going to keep getting the same results. And at some point, you kind of meet your breaking point where you're like, you know what? I've been scared of this, but what scares me more is continuing to live with this 5-10 years down the road and still be here when I could have done something today. And I think the regret that you could have done something earlier versus much later in life, where you now have reduced how much time you can actually spend living in a happier state. I think the state of happiness is something we need to tune into in order for us to be able to overcome some of the fears. Because for me, I was like, I don't want to live as a prisoner to my own fear. I got to liberate myself from that. And fear will keep us comfortable. Fear will keep everything just as it is. And a lot of us aren't happy with the way a lot of things are in our life. So, yeah, you got to just suck it up and do it. But there are certain things that you can do to take baby steps. You don't have to take one big leap all the time. You can start to make slow changes in your day-to-day that will shift the course of your life. So compounding change will eventually lead to a very big change. And I think you can start off by every day just saying, what is something I can do differently today that challenges me, that pushes me a little bit outside my comfort zone, just to shift the energy just a little bit. And eventually you'll get to a point where you're ready for more.
But then there's always the excuse that I give to myself is that I'm an all or nothing kind of guy. Like if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. Otherwise,
Yeah,
so
I know.
that's an excuse that
I'm very much the same. So I get it. I'm like an all or nothing sometimes too. And I've learned to get away from that because it's actually self-sabotage. I've learned
very
that
well
it's
familiar with that monster.
it's a mechanism of self-sabotage to be all or nothing when, sometimes, and because we live in an instant gratification society right now, if we don't have it immediately, then we don't try for it. And if we can learn anything from our own journey, is that it's never about the destination. And we miss out on all of the beautiful golden nuggets that are laid along our path, waiting for us to pick up along the way by being on that journey. And so look at everything in your life as a journey as opposed to a destination. And that every day you have an opportunity to pick up another gold nugget. And I think that one of the best ways we can do that is by pushing ourselves outside of our comfort zone in any kind of way. So for instance, if you want to paint, maybe like you start painting and you're like, let me just explore my creativity. I haven't done it. I've been wanting to do it, but I just don't find the time for it. I don't make the time for it. Like let me carve out 30 minutes every day and I'm going to paint and like nothing is going to stop me. And you prioritize it. And it's so important to allow you to give that gift to yourself. And as you do that, you just made yourself a priority. You made your desire a priority. And that speaks to your own self-worth and self-confidence, because now you're starting to be like, wow, I am a priority. I am important. What I want matters. And you start to propel that energy into other things, and it starts to compound and it accumulates and it picks up momentum. So you may not see everything right away, but that's okay. It's part of the journey. You're not meant to. This is a physical reality. It's 3D. Nothing happens right away down here. Everything's happening up there, though, in the 5D, right? In the etheric realm and all the energy realms. So we have to always keep that in mind.
So these are the types of advice that you give to your clients. And when I looked into your coaching, you do mention that no two people are coached the same. So you really kind of tailor the program to the individual person. And I got to tell you, Nicole, right now you're tailoring it to me because you're talking right at me. So I am aware of it, just so that we are clear. But I want to talk a little bit about your podcast, because that's how I found you for the first time. Your podcast is called the Enlighten Up podcast, and I am obsessed with it. Like the topics that you cover are right up my alley. I mean, you talk about ascension, you talk about quantum physics, awakening, the Akashic records, you talk about the matrix, you talk about so many different things on your show that every time I tune in, I know I'm going to grab one of those golden nuggets that you're talking about. So what prompted you to have these conversations with people?
This is like another beautiful example of the pathless path. I literally was at I was at my best friend's place in Florida. He had gone to work somewhere on the other side of the state. I mean, he was gone for like a day, and I woke up that morning, and my best friend at the time, Lisa, she called me crying, and she's just like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life, like that whole spiritual breakdown kind of thing. And I was like, why don't we start a podcast? Like, just so that you and I can talk. We'll ask Michael. He'll be our skeptic, because that's how we started. We're like, let's have a skeptic. So very, very similar to what you're doing. And when he came into our conversations, which can be really far out there, he would, like, with love in his heart, make fun of us to the point where we were able to laugh at ourselves, though. Like, we thought it was hilarious. And his take on it was so refreshing, because I'm so used to people in, like, the community just, parroting back, like, everything that we talk about. And he had a completely different perspective and had all these, like, funny little anecdotes to add to it. It's like, our conversations are pretty freaking hilarious. If someone were actually going to listen in on them, I don't know, I think a few people might listen. And so it was like, let's just have a podcast. If for nothing else, we just get to have an hour with one another and laugh and talk about spirituality. And that's how we started it. And now to this day, like, it's just now down to me because of scheduling and all that with other people and wanting to move on to different things with their life. But that's kind of how I got here. So it didn't start off with a thing like, yeah, I'm going to have this podcast, and 5 years later, like, this was everything that I intended it to be. It was something that just grew on its own, and I didn't even know the direction it was going until I was already there. So it was just one of those things where I'm like, let me just throw an idea out there and maybe we'll do it.
Right. Well, I was going to say, because I don't remember Michael or Lisa on your show, and I've listened to a bunch, so I was questioning maybe I'm interviewing the wrong person. No, I'm just.
Yeah. It's been 2 years solo now, so yeah.
That would explain it. Yeah. So then, is there a particular guest that really stands out in your mind as something that either you didn't know about and that really gave you a lot of wisdom, or that just blew your mind for one reason or another?
The one that quickly comes to my mind is Peter Maxwell Slattery. And he does the Iseti Ranch in Australia. And he is just an amazing soul. And his ability to go into all the different, like, not all the different, but just endless dimensions, and how he's able to verbalize it was just blowing my mind. I think I had him on my podcast about a year and a half ago. And I was mind blown. I was while I'm not sure, like, when you're just getting so much information, it's overwhelming that there's no way you can fully understand. You're going to have to listen to I was doing the show. I'm like, I'm going to have to listen to this at least a couple more times. But also, things were activating within me that I was getting all these downloads while he was talking. And it was just such a fun show to riff off of, like, each other's energy, and also have mine go to places that I didn't even know were possible. And then all of a sudden these downloads start coming in. And so I remember Peter was a pretty awesome guest.
Oh, it sounds like, I'm going to go back in the archives and see if I can find it, because it sounds interesting.
Yeah. Beyond This Galaxy, ETs and Dimensions as You Know It, with Peter Maxwell Slattery. So yeah, he's a wild one in a good way. Like just mind opening. The audience was live with me at the time. We did it live, and minds were being blown. Like, the whole chat was on fire. So it was pretty awesome.
It sounds awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely going to check it out. Now, you were also, you mentioned you were getting messages. You're also a channeler. You're intuitive, right? So you use tarot. You channel particular beings or just information? And how does that work for you?
Mostly just information. I think I'm channeling my higher self. Sometimes I do channel the Pleiadians. That energy signature is very easy for me to distinguish. I also channel people's inner child. So because inner child work has been something I've been doing since 2016, and my own inner child taught me how to heal the inner child, which is now why I do a lot of that work with my clients. And I have an online course that teaches you how to heal your inner child through the chakra system. And the channeling, actually, this is wild. I had in March of 2019, I believe it was March of 2019. Maybe it was, yes, it was March of 2019. I had a Pleiadian heart activation. And it happened when I expressed my love to someone that I didn't know how they were going to receive it. And it's the first time I've ever done that in my life, because I always wait till the other person tells me that they love me. Or I, at least if I'm saying it first, it's because I already know how they feel. But this one, like, I really didn't know. I was pretty sure they were going to run in the opposite direction. But my love was just so, I needed to express it. And I realized this wasn't even about him hearing it from me. This was about me expressing it to him. I needed it. And it was important to me because it totally pushed me past a lot of my own barriers. And even though he did love me, but he was too scared to get himself into a relationship. Like, it scared him too much. The Palladians came through and said they were able to receive the love because it came through so raw in my expression to him. Like, I let down all my guards and let him see all of me, that despite him not being able to fully receive it, they said they were able to receive it, and it allowed a connection now from me to them that I just started channeling. Like, I would be doing my YouTube videos and doing like readings, and all of a sudden I just like, oh, and it just started coming through. And so that was really interesting. The heart, now that I'm saying this, the heart opening is so vital, at least for me, in being able to connect to the messages. And as like we mentioned, I just came back from Mexico and did ayahuasca for the first time.
That's right.
And my intention for that ceremony was to open my heart further. I'm like, I really want to clear anything that's around my heart that's ready to be cleared so that I can love deeper and connect deeper to all people, not just like someone romantically. And I definitely got a heart clearing on that journey. And so I know that it's already starting to open up things for me intuitively. Like my dreams, I get a lot of galactic interaction. I'm on ships. I receive information, things that I maybe can't always access when I'm in my conscious state. So to anyone out there, intuition is so highly tied to your heart being cleared and open up. So, yeah.
I noticed you got a meditation to open up your telepathy and intuition, and that's one of the first ones I'm going to get because that sounds really interesting to me. But I did want to touch a little bit on your ayahuasca experience. I know that there's not a lot that you can share because you're still processing everything that you went through. But you did tell me before we started recording that there are different types of ayahuasca which I wasn't aware of, and this was a very unique type that you did.
Yeah, so even like trying to get this, I thought I was going to be super easy for me to do an ayahuasca journey down there in Mexico, because it just seems like everyone I talk to, like, oh yeah, once you're down there, it's just like there's tons to choose from, right? Well, for me, it was not the case. Like, it just seemed like everywhere I was asking, like, okay, like trying to find a shaman, someone. For me, the ceremony was very important. I wanted a very clear ceremony where the sacredness was upheld. I wanted to make sure that the shaman was creating the brew with a lot of respect. And also, I didn't want to be paying out like astronomical amounts, because there are places in Mexico that were charging like $500 to $700 for an ayahuasca journey, which it's usually around $100, $125. So at most. And so I was like, well, I'm just out of principle, I'm not paying that, because if they're ready to gouge me money wise, then I don't even know if I want to have that shaman like working with me. So
what kind of guidance can they ever give you? Yeah,
exactly. And so I ended up finding a shaman in the craziest way. And it happened when I finally let go. You have to detox before you do the ayahuasca. Like, you can't eat red meat. You can't drink alcohol. You can't have caffeine. You should stay away from dairy. You should stay away from grains for at least 2 days prior and the day of. But I did it like almost 2 weeks prior. And now I'm down in Mexico, and I've got a week vacation before I'm even going to do the ceremony. But now it's like I'm down there for 4 days. I'm like, I'm getting a no everywhere I'm going. What if I don't even get to do this journey and I'm still detoxing while I'm on vacation? I'm like, no, that's not happening.
Right.
And I said, you know what? If it's meant to be, it'll be. And I was like, I'm going to get a pulled pork sandwich and I'm going to have a margarita. So I go and I do that. And sure enough, an hour later after I finished, my friend messages me, oh, I found a shaman for you. And I'm like, of course it happened. So,
yeah. So did you have to wait then a couple more days before you did it?
No, because it was still still outside of the 2 days thing. So it wasn't a big deal. So the shamans that I had were Colombian. They were from Colombia, and the shaman who made the brew, he wasn't there. He had left already. But the brew was made under the full moon of Libra in April. So there was which was perfect because Libra ruled by the planet Venus. And I was wanting to open my heart, and Venus, Libra is specifically about emotions and bringing things into balance and harmonizing things. And so I was like, oh my gosh, there are too many synchronicities coming around this. And so my particular ayahuasca ceremony date happened to be also on the day that Venus was transiting my natal sun, like literally transiting, like right over top of it. So already the Venus energy of the heart was right on top of the sun, of like how I kind of express myself in many ways, or how the world sees me and in my work and everything. And on top of that, the planet Uranus was 1 degree off of Venus, which is all about sudden change and shocking like things and just liberation, revolution, So I was like, okay, well, already things are really lining up for this journey. But on top of that, right an hour before we started the ceremony, the moon moved into Scorpio, which is the most intense sign for the moon to be in. And it was opposing my sun, Venus, and Uranus. So it was creating this like push and pull energy of intensity and going to dig into the deepest parts of you. And we're going to pull up the truth so it can't be hidden anymore. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I was like, this is all meant to happen.
But it sounds frightening though at the same time.
It was. And so what I find out too, and what does Scorpio rule? It rules detoxing, right? It's all about detoxifying and cleansing. And this particular ayahuasca was from a Colombian vine. Now, usually it's from the Peruvian vine. I didn't even know that there was a Colombian vine, but there is. And there's a very distinct difference between the two. The Peruvian vine is the one that will give you more visions. It does also cleanse and heal, but it's predominantly more about visions. The Colombian one is predominantly about healing and detoxing. So needless to say, I had the most intensely detoxifying experience of my entire life.
I can only imagine what that must mean.
Yeah. So I'm processing a lot of it. What I asked for in my ceremony, I absolutely received, probably more than I bargained for, but in a good way. And not very much of it has been revealed to me yet. So I'm allowing some stuff has been coming through in little drips and like almost like little puzzle pieces being given to me at a time. My dreams are starting to reveal a little bit, but something definitely cracked open in my heart. And there's been a major shift there. It's something I know I can't push. I can't force it. So it'll probably be, I don't even want to say it'll just be a couple more weeks. Who knows how long it'll be until I actually understand more fully what's going on. And so it was a very humbling experience. It is definitely something you don't go into lightly. I will say at one point, I questioned why I ever even paid money to do it.
Wow. Interesting.
But in the end of it all, I had pure gratitude for it. Pure gratitude. And it's one of those things where you have your breakdowns, you go through that spiritual awakening. There's one point where it's like rainbows and unicorns. And then there's one point where you just feel like you're in the depths of your own hell. And that's where I went with this ayahuasca journey on a physical level in many ways, some mental, where I felt like I was in the depths of a hell that I had never even experienced before on a physical level. But when I got out of it, I had gratitude because I received what I needed to receive. So it's that whole idea of, again, we want our journey to be a certain way, but sometimes what we really need is something else.
Yeah, see, that's what makes me nervous about the whole ayahuasca, DMT, bullfrog thing, because I do tend to react very strongly to any kind of foreign substance in my body. I'm a one-hit wonder, people say, right? Went back in college days, that kind of thing. It didn't take me very much. So my fear is that my experience would be so intense. I mean, I read all the Carlos Castaneda books. I'm going through them all over again to remind myself. We've talked to people on the show about psychedelics and things like that. And my fear is that I will lose myself in every way. And that's the reason why I haven't done that. So why I look for natural ways of finding the same type of spiritual awakening as some of these substances can give.
Okay, let's pause on that for a second, because you said something really important there. is that you're so afraid you're going to lose yourself in every possible way.
Yes.
And what did I tell you about the pathless path?
Oh no, I'm right there with you. I'm
It's
telling you.
you only find yourself on the pathless path when you're completely lost. And that's where all of the greatness that I've been able to achieve in my life has been from actually being lost.
Look, some of my favorite books have been Way of the Peaceful Warrior and The Celestine Prophecy, and it's all exactly
Great
that,
books.
being brought to something, like be called to somewhere. And I know that that is how I'm going to benefit the most by doing that, by walking the pathless path. But you're right, fear, it's a big thing, and I've not yet found a way around it. But little by little, I'm getting
You
there.
know, it was something I had to face in this journey was surrender. It's not my easiest. It's not something that comes naturally to me. I've been very programmed to be comfortable in my masculine energy and uncomfortable in my feminine energy, which has shifted a lot over the years of my healing. But throwing up, puking, which happens a lot through ayahuasca ceremonies,
I heard about that. Yes.
I can almost guarantee you it will happen if you do the Colombian vine. There was a moment where I was so scared because I have a fear of actually throwing up. I used to pray to God when I was a kid that I would do anything that he wanted if he would make the feeling of me having to throw up go away. Like there was something about it I didn't want to do. And so I was a little nervous about that whole part of the journey. And at one point I was like, I am here. I am embracing it. I surrender. I let go. I surrender. And I just kept saying it to myself over and over until the purging would finally just start happening.
That's what they say. When you fight it, right? God, I'm not going to remember the exact words, but something about the fact that the more you fight it, the more he grabs hold of you and makes you face it. And when you finally let go and release and say, I surrender, that's when he decides to say, okay, now we can move forward with a conversation. And that's when Mezcalito will like you or not like you, that kind of thing. So
yes, that which you resist will persist.
that's it. That was it right there. Yeah, absolutely. Nicole, I could talk to you all day, literally all day long. In fact, I think we've had this conversation many times, not in this way, but in many other ways. But your podcast is Enlighten Up Podcast. I recommend it to anyone who is interested in metaphysics, spirituality, spiritual awakening, all that kind of stuff. It's a really great show, and I don't say that lightly. So look it up. I'm going to add direct links to the podcast, to your website, to your social medias directly on our show notes. So if you're listening to this on a mobile device, you can go directly to the show notes and hit the link directly. It will take you straight to Nicole. Nicole, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to make sure we touch on before we call it a day?
The only thing I would say is we kind of touched on it was like the inner child. It's become like a cornerstone of a lot of my journey and how I help clients. And the reason is because the inner child is a portal in and of itself. It will take you in quantum leaps forward in your own intuitive development. And it will also take you in quantum leaps forward in your own healing, which will give you access to the enjoyment of your life in ways you didn't even know were possible. And so connecting with the inner child can seem a little bit daunting. It can be scary because there's a lot of things that we've repressed that we don't want to remember, that we don't even know we don't remember. And this is one of the reasons why I created the online course to heal your inner child, was because it can feel very daunting when even just to kind of talk to, if someone were to book an inner child session with me, what I found happened was we would do some great work. We break through some emotional blocks and barriers. But until I actually took someone on a guided journey to connect with their inner child, that's when all the magic happened in my sessions. So it was last summer that I started doing that with my clients, and I started to realize, whoa, I can't just tell people this is what you do. I have to actually take them through it. And then they get it. Then they understand. And then all of a sudden the doors are wide open. And so what I did was like, let me create a course that has in it my most powerful meditation that I've ever created. It was channeled. The whole thing was pretty much channeled. And it is a meditation that reconnects you to your own inner child. I had a guy who just recently signed up and said he's never experienced visions before. He's very new to his own journey. He's very new to the spiritual journey. And that meditation hit him in ways where he started to have visions that he's never had before. He got emotional in ways that he didn't know he could access. And so if any of your audience members are really wanting to take things to a whole different level, and it doesn't mean like if you're new, you can't access it. It's for all levels, but I take you through all the basics that allow you to access the depths of things that you think you're not even capable of reaching. And that includes intuition, and that includes heart healing. So to me, those are like the things that I think ultimately we're all looking for, but we don't realize the package that it actually comes in. And to me, the best portal to all of that is our inner child.
There's all kinds of things that you do that we weren't even able to touch, but this is important. So when someone does past life regressions, one of the first things they ask you is, do you meditate? Because if you don't meditate regularly, it might be difficult to get to a certain level where you get the most out of that therapy. Is this the same thing where you really need to be adept at meditation, or anyone can do it?
No, anyone can do it. And there's 2 meditations that are in that course. It's about 8 or 9 modules. I would say it would take you a few months to get through the course at fastest, just because you really want to spend time with each section. But one is the reconnection to the inner child. The other one is healing your DNA from the point of conception in your mother's womb. And so you're not even just the inner child, you're literally like the embryo. You're like at the point of conception. And this is something that was kind of shown to me through my inner child and healing that I take you through. And it's all guided. I do it in a way that anyone who's ever meditated before or not can do and enjoy. You don't have to be experienced in any way whatsoever. In fact, I think anyone who's not experienced might be pleasantly surprised at like what they might actually be able to access through that. The other thing is that I outline everything in a very basic way so that you don't even have to understand too many of the concepts. I break down the chakras, I break down the energies, the emotional needs, the physical needs, the shadow elements of each chakra, and why the inner child, how it all starts. And you will literally be able to, it's almost like what will happen is, oh my God, everything's clicking together. It all makes freaking sense now, why I am the way I am, and why my relationships are the way they are, and why I have been chosen to do this, and why I keep choosing to do this. It's so like, it's just laid out that way so that anyone of any level can do it.
Wow. And you mentioned it's an online library of courses. Is this something that you walk someone through, or is this kind of learn it on your own as you go?
No, you just do it on your own pace. It's online. So each module focuses on one section. Like, so one is just an introduction, like, who is the inner child? Why do I even want to reconnect with the inner child? And I talk about some of the mistakes that everyone makes when actually trying to heal their inner child. And then I go into the different chakras. So, and then of course there's a very spiritual, let's call it final exam, but it's not really a final exam. It's got shamanic elements to it, that if you actually do that and participate in it, could probably change your life in a very interesting way. But it's something that's all videos, and I give you a ton of questions and exercises to work through. So it's all that. And then I let people know, if you get to a scary part, which is very normal, where you're not sure you can do it on your own, I am here for individual sessions. And then I guide you through it. And I've had clients reach out to me they're like, you know what, I've been doing well, but now I'm finding myself scared now. I need some help. And so I do. And that's what I'm here for. So, but it's really good at giving you the basics and the foundation so that you have a really good foundation to build upon from there.
Well, I am sold. You got me. I'm going to try it. I'm going to do it. That sounds amazing, especially if it's something that really anyone can benefit from, because the problem sometimes is that, again, the fear kind of prevents me from going too deep into anything. So maybe this is the way to go about it. Nicole, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and sharing of your messages, your expertise with us, because I have valued every message that you've put out there on social media and on your show. And I really appreciate you taking the time and coming and sharing of yourself with us.
Oh, thank you so much, Will. It's such a pleasure to be on your show. You're wonderful. And I'm so excited to be part of this with you.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for coming along on this journey of discovery. Hey, we'd love to continue our conversation with you on our website or on Facebook and Instagram under @Skeptic Metaphysician. Of course, the website is skepticmetaphysician.com. And if you're listening to this on the radio and you missed anything, not to worry. All of our shows, including this one, can be found at skepticmetaphysician.com, where you can also watch the videos or even send us email or voicemails directly from the site. We absolutely love feedback and would appreciate hearing from you. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as I have. That's all for now. I'll see you on the next episode of the Skeptic Metaphysicians. Until then, take care.